Welcome to ParaTruth.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And today we are talking hospitals. They're a place of healing and life-saving miracles, but also of heartbreak, trauma, and death. Their sterile hallways and echoing corridors have witnessed the beginning and end of countless human stories. But what if some of those stories never stop? From abandoned asylums and forgotten sanitariums to the modern day ERs still bustling with life, tales of lingering spirits, phantom patients, and haunted operating rooms continue to emerge across the U.S. and even around the world. Are these just urban legends fueled by fear and grief, or is there something truly supernatural clinging to those wards? Now, Eric, you and I have been doing this long enough that I feel we have a firm grasp that we know there's more to it than just urban legend.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely for sure. Sorry, just for a moment here. I just pulled up our notes, and it turned out my notes are not the notes that you just that we're supposed to have. So I need to go to my phone real quick.
Well, it took a minute for my tablet to catch up too. So,
well, this is future episode. Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Finally, I was like, what is he looking at? Like, this is not what. I'm sorry. What was your question now? What did you just say?
I said, that through the years that we've been doing this, I think we can both say that it's more than just urban legend.
Oh, yeah.
When a hospital is haunted.
Well, yeah, for sure.
I think we've even had doctors on who have said, there's things going on that typically you don't hear from a doctor because we can't disclose these things. But
right, yeah, we've had a number of people on who have talked about hospital hauntings, and one in particular, he wrote a whole book on haunted hospitals that we had on our original show, ParaTruth Radio, not Reborn, back in 2014, I think it was. But he was an author of a book, and I forget his name. It's been a long time. But he came on to talk about haunted hospitals, and then not long after that, we had someone on who was an EMT who wrote a book on various paranormal phenomena from the standpoint of or viewpoint of EMT. So definitely there are hauntings that surround these places for a very good reason, right? It's high emotion, especially in like hospitals that are that have emergency rooms. We're talking about high emotion. We're talking high energy. Obviously there's illness, there's death, there's all kinds of, there's highs and lows, people getting better and healing, and then people passing away. So there's a lot of mixed energies within these hospitals that just tend to linger, and they tend to be a feeding point for a lot of spirits, either those that remain there for one reason or another, or, as we know through various documentations, a kind of breeding ground or feasting ground for darker entities to come in from the outside and kind of take up root and even manipulate the spirits that may be there from prior. When the hospitals were in the heyday, or even modern day hospitals, where there are a lot of things happening.
Yeah, well, and I didn't include it in this the top 5 that I have listed, but there is one here right in North Dakota that was a tuberculosis ward. Then it eventually became a sanitarium, and it was actually the help of my in-laws and several other families who had it shut down, because if you had autism, if you had Down syndrome, these people were being sent to basically an insane asylum, and that is not where they should have been. So that plays a huge part of it too, because so many people were mistreated, not necessarily abused, but mistreated, not looked after properly. So that, I think that's kind of what causes some of these hauntings in the sanitariums or tuberculosis wards too.
No, 100%. I mean, especially, I wouldn't say earlier years, but back in like the 1700s, especially 1800s, and dare I say the early 1900s, where some of the sanitariums and hospitals where people would be placed there and they would just be left to rot. People who worked there would come in, not even take the time to really care for these people. They just make sure that they're still breathing, basically, give them some food and leave. Right. So, there was a lot of suffering in a lot of these places, unfortunately. And thankfully, a lot of those places have been shut down because of that reason. But that's not to say there aren't still some out there. And if not hospitals in themselves, there are people who are out there. In fact, I recently heard a story about an individual who was treating some patients uncaringly, and she was approached and said, like, you can't be doing this. Like, this is not the way you perform your job. And it's sad that there are just people who are so hardened to the ill that they just they treat them, I don't know, like a cancer in a way. Like they're just they're a burden, which just really develops a unclean attachment to these hospitals should that person pass away. Now, whether or not it's their actual spirit sticking around or just the energy, obviously we can't say for sure. There is technically no scientific evidence. Tell me how that works, because I still don't understand it, since we seem to have a lot of evidence. But yeah, you guys know how it is.
All right. Well, we'll go into a little bit of history about hospitals. In the U.S., isolation hospitals started in the mid 1700s. If you don't know what an isolation hospital is, basically we were just talking about tuberculosis, any major disease where they wanted to separate those that were sick from the general populace so it didn't cause an epidemic or a pandemic. Benjamin Franklin actually was the one that helped start the Pennsylvania Hospital in 1751, which was the first hospital to treat actual medical conditions.
Actually, also real quick, if no one has had the opportunity to read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, I highly recommend it. I read it back in it was nearly 20 years ago now, probably, roughly, maybe a little less than that, around 17, 18.
Was it for school or just had
it was for school? It was for school. But and it was one of those online things, but I ended up printing out, back then I couldn't find it. I didn't want to pay for it. So I was like, I'm just going to print. I printed out hundreds of sheets of paper and stapled them together. But it was, I've read a number of autobiographies and I just really enjoyed his in particular. It is very historical. So it's not all like, butterflies and like exciting, some of it is kind of boring. But the things that Benjamin Franklin had helped develop or establish is crazy. Like we just said, the Pennsylvania Hospital in 1751. He also established the very first library, and he also created the very first fire department, among a number of other things. So it's just crazy the amount of things that this guy invented.
Yeah. Everybody knows the story about him tying a key and putting it in a jar onto a kite to see what lightning was made of, and discovering, we'll put it in quotations, electricity. But yeah, and I've brought up this on the other podcast we were doing for a while, that I've listened to Stephen King's On Writing, which is kind of an autobiography / here's how you write type of thing from his perspective. And his was really good. I listened it to on audiobook, and he was the one that actually narrated it, which was fascinating to me.
I still occasionally I still look for like a physical copy of Ben's autobiography, but there's just nothing that speaks to me. Like a
Oh,
lot of it looked very textbooky, and I'm hoping to find something that's like leather bound, something that's just
oh
like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And you've got some really good uh tomes of classic stories too. So
Yeah, yeah. It's one of my, I would say, I guess, many collections. I collect things. That's definitely
we
one.
should just call him Eric the Collector, and it sounds like a weird serial killer name.
Right? The tome collector.
Um, so Edward Livingstone Trudeau built the first American sanatorium in 1885, which was over 100 years later after Ben Franklin had started the first medical hospital.
Mhm.
Trudeau believed he cured himself of tuberculosis after spending time in the mountains. The reason for that was the high altitudes, lower air pressure. He thought that had stopped the tuberculosis from uh, moving forward and actually had cured himself of it. Um, Sanatoriums were built with bright open spaces to maximize exposure to sunlight and clean air. Again, like I just mentioned, they believed that was a way to help cure tuberculosis.
I mean, in a way, when you like considering that real quick, nowadays modern times, obviously, we have devices that are built with UV light to help disinfect items such
Mhm.
as phones and keys. So, considering 1885, that's relatively
Advanced.
yeah, pretty advanced. I mean, whether or not it can cure you know,
Yeah, a major disease, right?
back then,
But
try anything now.
yeah, I mean, it was at least sanitary, whether it helped with
True.
the
That's
disease.
true.
Yeah. Um,
I've heard a lot worse in the recent years. Let's just put it that way. Certain individuals who are high in the political chain.
yeah. Yeah. There was something I heard today that I'm like, oh my gosh. Um, the interiors were plain, so they were easy to clean and prevent the spread of disease, which we see in most hospitals today. All white walls. Most hospitals will try to have as much natural light to get into at least patients' rooms because they are just flooded with the U or not UV
Fluorescent lighting.
fluorescent light. That thank you. Um, which actually I have seen studies that say that actually hinders healing.
Yeah, fluorescent lighting. I mean, I don't know if it actually hinders healing, but you guys ever walk into a hospital and you just feels kind of like sickly, despite the fact that there's sick people probably there.
Well, right.
Fluorescent lighting tends to, when it's really hot, it tends to burn kind of greenish tone. So it gives you a sick like look or feeling to the surroundings. They use them because they're super bright and that's important within the hospital. But yeah, it's not the most pretty light to you.
Yeah.
So those big windows are very important.
Last part of this section from about Edward Livingstone Trudeau, bent wood recliners were commonly used in sanatoriums because they were durable and could withstand disinfectants, which again I believe is still true to most hospitals today. They use I don't know if they're bentwood recliners, but they use things that are easily cleanable and
Yeah, typically made of like a like a vinyl.
yeah,
Typically vinyl. It's very rare that anything's leather nowadays, but
right, yeah, right. The Pennsylvania hospital, the one that Ben Franklin started, was the first organized effort to care for the mentally ill in America, including rooms located in the basement and had shackles attached to the walls. So you were starting to see where the mis use of certain things was not a good idea, but they had no other options back then, of course. Um, asylums became more widespread and popular in the 1800s. Asylums were developed to provide support and safety to people who could not be cared for at home. Treatment in asylums was sometimes brutal and focused on containment and restraint rather than practical care and provisions. Something I did read, I didn't include it in our notes, but a lot of asylums, some of them in the top 5 will say this, also included having people that were homeless or basically the unwanted. And they had no place else to go, so they would go to the sanitariums or asylums. And I mean, some of the things that we can go over is what caused asylums to no longer be a good option. It says vaguely practices and stuff that were not good, but there were people left in their own filth. It brought up shackles, some treatments such as lobotomies or electric shock therapy, who, in today's day and age will be a barbaric treatment.
Right. I mean, they still have shock therapy, though not quite the same.
Right. Yeah. And they very rarely use it unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right. Fun fact, I almost used it. I almost did for my OCD years ago. I actually almost requested shock therapy because it is one of the treatments.
I didn't know it was for severe OCD. So, I mean, there were other cases where there was actual physical and sexual abuse to patients as well, just because they couldn't do anything about it. Or there were reports of doctors medically sedating individuals to do those things too.
Right.
But I'll have you kind of read through the top 5 haunted hospitals.
Yeah, so these are no like particular order, and these are specifically haunted hospitals within the US that we're going to share here.
Yeah. And there were so many more, but it was very hard to narrow down top 5.
Right. But with that said, like I'm gonna number them 5 through 1 again. By no means are they in particular order. However, if you have any thoughts yourself on the authenticity, intensity of the hauntings, definitely feel free to share with us and let us know what your top 5 are. Whether it's part of this top 5 or you'd reorder these in any way, like we definitely want to know that. And if there's anything we haven't covered, definitely share your opinions as well. That is something I do notice a lot on Facebook. I'm in a number of haunted Ohio groups and haunted US groups and things like that. And there are always new places that I'm learning about as being claimed as the most haunted versus the popular options. So that's really cool. Gives us more stuff to, at least me, more stuff to kind of dive into, and learn about. So we would love to know that. Anyway, so for number 5, we're going to start off with one that probably everybody knows. In fact, everyone probably knows most of these, but the first one is Penhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania, which was established in 1908. They took in both physically and mentally ill patients, and they also housed inmates who were not just criminals, but also orphans, immigrants, or anyone who didn't have a place to go, basically. Of course, in the 1960s, they were super overcrowded and underfunded and in disrepair. So the institution was eventually shut down in 1987. And this is the kind of thing that typically happens with a lot of these types of early institutions. They do become overcrowded and underfunded. And in fact, I mean, just to put it out there, like this is the same thing happening in the US regarding various penitentiaries and prisons currently. They are underfunded and overcrowded. American officers, are putting people in detainment for no reason, really, no reason they should be in prison. And we see that time and time again. There's so many shows about it and radio specials regarding the unfortunate events that happen within prisons in America because of the overcrowdedness.
Well,
it was,
and going on the underfunded, I mean, it's probably common sense, but which means understaffed. I actually had a friend who was wrongfully just arrested because there was somebody with a suspended license and I'm assuming a warrant with the exact same name.
Yeah, I mean, things like that happen all the time. We've also, it's one of the reasons why so many states actually in the U.S. have legalized marijuana, because there were a number of people going to prison for carrying or smoking marijuana. Like, you should not be in a prison for that. That's
right. And the ratio to people just with a marijuana charge to those that had a more serious charge of murderers and rapists and stuff,
right.
Like, there's more people in jail for carrying than there was more heinous crimes.
Right. So now, of course, Pennhurst has been definitely one of the number one spots that many investigators have gone to over the years. It still is very common for people to go and check it out. But we have here like a couple of EVPs that we had heard about from Weird New Jersey. And a couple of the EVPs that they caught were things like "We're upset," "Why won't you leave?" and "Go away, I'm scared." Of course, if you want to hear any of those EVPs or any others, you can easily just look up EVPs or paranormal investigations at Pennhurst on YouTube, and you will get a ton of stuff that you can enjoy for hours.
Yep.
Number 4 on our list is Northville State Hospital in Michigan. Established in 1952, it was one of the most modern mental hospitals in the U.S. at the time. They were early promoters of using art and music to treat patients, and in the 1970s, priorities shifted and the hospital started to decline. It was eventually also shut down in the early 2000s. And one of the interesting things about it is that it had tunnels underneath the hospital where there had been a number of reports of hearing voices and footsteps and the feeling of being breathed on. For those of you who don't know why there might be tunnels underneath the hospital, one of the most popular reasons is because when someone would die, they would roll them down through these tunnels so that it wouldn't be pushing them past the living up above. And they would also often keep the morgues down in these tunnels as well, as it was naturally cooler than it would be upstairs, especially if air conditioning wasn't that strong.
A lot of times, too, the tunnels would lead to cremation areas, too, if somebody wasn't being picked up by a family member or whatever.
Right. Number 3.
I had never heard of Northville, just FYI. Most of these others I've heard of, but Northville was a new one to me.
And number 3 is Rolling Hills Asylum in New York. This one was established in 1827 as the Genesee County Poorhouse. They were all referred to as inmates there, and the facility was known to perform lobotomies and electric shock therapy as treatments. Now, the most frequent spirit that is cited is named Roy, who supposedly died in 1942. He was supposedly, or at least reportedly, to be about 7 feet tall in life, and his spirit appears as a shadow just as tall and often crying. Again, you can find the images and videos of this shadow on YouTube. I have seen this particular entity on television shows in the past, so it's definitely out there if you want to check it out. If you're one of those people who like to debunk stuff, it's one of those fun ones to check out. I always try debunking it. It's definitely interesting, and the simple fact that this person was 7 feet tall, like, it's kind of hard to see a 7 foot tall shadow, but oh, that's not, that's, who knows, they come up with a reason. It's pretty unnormal.
I will say this: if I saw a 7 foot shadow while doing an investigation, I will do the exact same thing I did at the Jeffrey Dahmer house and excuse myself, because that's a pretty frightening vision.
Well, here's the thing, though. Now, whether or not it was 7 feet, 10 feet, or less, I don't know. But when we were, you might recall this, when we were at Ghost Alley, when we were invited to do an investigation after doing a residential investigation,
Mm-hmm.
When we first got there, you and I, our team, were guided through the main source of the haunting, the main area, which was the basement area, which also happened to be like basically a cellar. Is where they kept a lot of the product that they would, have on storage. There was also a kitchen down there and a couple of back rooms. I can't remember what the back rooms were, but as we were walking down this one aisle, it's a really wide aisle, and there's a bunch of shelving on one wall, and then to our right, and then shelving to our left. And you were sensing something. Now, at the time, you were very strongly practicing mediumship, and a lot of what you were connecting with happened to be the same as what their own medium had encountered earlier that day. And no one told you anything about it. So the fact those two things coincided was really interesting. But at the same time that you were experiencing those things, I did capture or catch a shadow that darted across the wall from left to right. And it was above the shelving. Like, it was really large. Either it was like a large being where this was basically like 10 feet roughly, maybe like 8 feet in the air. But it was large. So it was like, it could have been like an actual entity of some sort that was right there, or it might have been the shadow of an entity that was further away from the light source, making the shadow appear bigger than what it really would have been had it just, been the figure right in front of us. Right. But that is something that we try to debunk on a lot of these investigations, because people see large shadows. Mind you, the closer you are to a light source, and the further you are away from the wall or whatever your shadow is projected on, the larger your shadow is going to get. The further you get away from that light source and the closer to the wall, the smaller the shadow gets. So that is something that if you're doing investigations and you notice a large shadow, first and foremost, check with your surrounding and make sure your teammates aren't in any vicinity in which their shadow could have been cast or your own shadow could have been cast. And then go forth with try to find out what the being is or what the entity is, if indeed you've debunked that it's not you guys. I've seen a lot of people make that mistake where they claim a shadow person, but in reality, it's just their own shadow.
Didn't you chase a shadow person, or was it just a sound at that same location?
That was a sound. So me and this woman, Erin, she was the daughter of the lead investigator of that team. We were sitting in the basement by ourselves at this table, and we were just having a normal conversation. We had the EVP digital voice recorder running, and all of a sudden we hear this really loud bang. Like, it was crazy loud. It echoed through the room. I think it was heard upstairs, possibly. I can't remember. But we knew where it came from. It definitely came from the kitchen. It almost sounded like someone just slammed their fist up against the steel fridge. Okay. And for a moment, we both paused and just stared at each other. And without single words, we both got up, split, and went in two different directions to try to, encircle and cut off whoever it was that made that noise. And we met up on the other side of the building or this room with nothing passing either of us. And there was a bunch of steel appliances in there. So it very well had to have come from this kitchen area. And we tried to debunk it. And aside from, the steel making a very similar noise, much quieter, of course, because we weren't banging on it, but we were hitting it to see what the vibration was like. It was clear to us that something or somebody had to have put some sort of power into that refrigerator or something to have made that noise. But it was just us down there.
Okay. Yeah, I remembered that part for sure. I don't remember if you had mentioned the shadow person to me at the time. Maybe you did, but
it probably wouldn't have mentioned it at that moment. I could have swore I told you probably afterward.
You probably did
in the middle of sharing your thoughts of what you thought was there.
Right. All right. Please proceed.
Sure. So number 2 on our list is Eloise.
Eloise.
Eloise Complex in Michigan. This one was established in 1839 as a poorhouse and farm. Now, eventually they added a psychiatric hospital, a turbulent. Oh my goodness. I should have got the whiskey, guys. I'm totally fine. I just don't know how to read. Tuberculosis sanitarium and a county hospital. And it consisted of 76 buildings. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And over 10,000 patients. It closed its doors in 1986, probably because I was born that year. I was like, oh, we can't. Nope. He's coming into town.
Yeah.
We can't. Wow. Okay. So it closed its doors in 1986. And people who have visited in modern day have actually reported mysterious moans, screams, a spectral woman in white at the asylum, and glowing lights floating around. And this is another thing that's like really interesting is this whole spectral woman in white, right? Because this is a character that shows up in a number of different folklore throughout the world. But here in America, the woman in white is typically a person, a woman, first and foremost, who
she's in white,
who happens to be in white, usually like a white gown or some sort, who stands on the side of the road trying to trying to hitchhike, get a ride. This is a person who was typically died in some horrible fashion. And usually she'll get into the car. The person will drive a mile or two and talking to this person. And then all of a sudden she's gone, just disappears. There are some horrifying tales that she has tried to hurt people. But whether or not any of that is actually legit there's just no solid evidence. But nonetheless, that's what folklore is, right? They're tales that we can take with a grain of salt or take them as is. And, yeah. So, but, seeing that there's a woman in white also at the asylum, this is probably someone who is wearing like a white hospital gown, most likely.
Right.
Not the same type of woman in white. And glowing lights floating around, as you guys know, I mean, whether you're paranormal investigators or you're not, if you're listening to this show, you probably know what those glowing lights probably are. It's very potential to be orbs, most likely, typically a ghost orb. I've seen them myself a number of different times, both at locations investigated, but also in my own home when there is a spirit around. But also glowing lights tend to show up in a more extraterrestrial fashion during big hauntings. One in particular, actually, for example, would be Skinwalker Ranch, as you guys might have heard. There's a lot of UFO phenomena happening there. And
a lot of phenomenon in general together.
Yeah. But that kind of stuff tends to happen. Like somehow it's why we talk often about extraterrestrials and the spiritual realm being possibly one of the, at least from the same place, right? Ghosts and aliens being from the same dimension, because they tend to correlate to each other. When one exists, the other one does too, in many cases, especially if it's a really big haunting. So definitely, what these particular glowing lights were, I mean, mostly they've all been orbs, but I wouldn't doubt there were some things in the sky as well, or across the fields around the surrounding areas.
Right.
And then number 1 on our list, which is probably one of the most famous aside from number 5, is Waverly Hills Sanitarium.
And one that we have yet to be able to get into on top of that.
Right. So this one is in Kentucky. Now, it was established in 1910. And by 1926, the capacity had drastically increased due to tuberculosis patients increasing. They employed certain treatments, such as implanting balloons into the lungs and removing ribs and chest muscles to help with lung expansion, which I don't know what you guys know about that, but,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about the shock therapy and stuff. I mean, there was so much experimentation going on back then. I mean, I will say this, it has paved the way for a lot of treatments that we know today, but today it would seem very barbaric.
Yeah, I think, and here's the thing that I want to say about that, because it has allowed an advancement in technology nowadays and how we treat patients. But there are instances in which I think the world glorifies the medical teams who figured it out, but they forget about the individual who had to suffer through the torment of it all.
Absolutely, 100%.
And so for a moment, I would just like to take 5 seconds, moments silence for those individuals. Okay, so we're moving on. No, for real though. Like it's a sad thing, you know, like we don't hear about it. It's just like they're a blip on the radar. And I mean, honestly, we treat those individuals in many cases, like in normal discussions. Obviously, investigators are going in. We often hear these investigators in TV shows on YouTube and otherwise talking about how horrible it was for these patients. And they're often giving their condolences and talking about how sad it is. But I think as a majority people throughout the world, we don't think about those things that often. And especially when you're talking about advancements in technology, medical technology, we don't think about the people who suffered in order for those technologies to come about. So definitely just for reference, y'all, keep that in mind. You know, we got to be careful what we praise and what we, I guess, what we lift up when we're thinking about such things.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, going on from these removing of ribs and chest muscles to help with lung expansion, when treatments didn't work, these people were sent down a 500-foot tunnel to trains that transported the bodies away. The institution closed in 1961, but reopened in 1962 as a nursing home, then permanently closed in 1982. Just 20 years later, due to patient mistreatment and violations, which again is something very common with all of these places. Now, many people these days claim that the spirits of these poor souls now reside mostly in the tunnels, and that activity has been reported of shadow figures, orbs, full body apparitions, disembodied screaming and laughing, and also of objects moving.
So, some things that are common denominators, if you will, for these top 5 hospitals, I feel any sanatoriums that were shut down is one barbaric-ish experiments to try and treat. Most, if not all of them, were either insane asylums that kind of turned into sanatoriums, tuberculosis wards, or vice versa. All of them were shut down or had to shut down for whatever reason. And all 5 of them have significant reports of activity for those that have gone in after everything that's happened there.
Right. And not to mention, well, I guess I am mentioning it, so I guess we will mention the amount of people who died there in unnatural ways, primarily due to malpractice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The hospital that's here is called Sandhaven. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ghost Adventures did an investigation there. It was similar situations, and there, I mean, the people that were there, like I mentioned, they were in their own filth, and that's not necessarily due to malpractice or anything like that. Like Eric mentioned earlier, a lot of these places were underfunded and understaffed, so they could only stop in every once in a while, sometimes even every few days, to see these patients. And some of the stuff that happen in these places, it, in my mind, is no wonder that there's these hauntings, or at least reported hauntings. If people are going in there knowing what happened there, that in and of itself will cause people to at least experience haunting type activity because they know what happened there.
Right.
And that's, I think we've preached this so many times on this show. Don't scare yourself into the haunting, if you will. Rely on the evidence, rely on the experiences there. Take some of those experiences with a grain of salt, because it is kind of a scary process, especially if you're doing it in the dark. And there have been some weird things that have happened there. Anything I've missed on the commonalities of it?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much hit all the nails. I think they're pretty good and dead. Yeah, and also, like, I do want to add though, like, because you just said don't scare yourself into a haunting, believing in the haunting or whatever. Also, don't paint yourself in a corner into simply accepting that a haunting is there even when it isn't. That is something that I see too common nowadays, and something that even me and Justin have been at one point in time guilty of. So also often we go into these places or we research these places, we want to think haunting. And in reality, we trick our minds into seeing things and feeling things that aren't really there. So there is a certain type of psychological aspect to investigations, and you need to learn to shut that off in a way. Because I think psychologically it's very important to be engaged and know your surroundings and understand what's happening so that you don't become trapped by some sort of spirit that's oppressive. But you also don't want to just walk in nilly-willy thinking like, oh, this place is haunted. Let's go get all the evidence and, end up turning out to be a fraud later when you share that evidence.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Out of all of these, or any that you know of, is there any of these hospitals that you would absolutely want to go investigate?
I would love to investigate Waverly. Like, that's a place that has been kind of a bucket list, I've watched so many documentaries on Waverly Hills Sanitarium that is kind of like, it's almost as if I know it. Like it's my aunt or something. It's like, that's how well I know it. Like, you're the crazy aunt who's had a lot of deaths in there.
Let's talk.
We need to chat. You had a lot of weird stuff happen in your lifetime.
Waverly Hills, is that a hotel now, or is that just an abandoned building?
I think it's just an abandoned building.
Okay. I know there's a hotel that's been 100% haunted. Stephen King based his room 1807 or whatever it is.
That one.
I believe that's the name of it. If you guys know the name of the hotel, please put it in the comments, because I'll probably find it too. But I thought it was at Waverly Hills, but it's probably actually just a hotel that's been haunted for a long time. Which we could probably get into prisons and hotels and everything else for that matter.
Oh, for sure. That's going to be the next thing I brought up, was like, in terms of prisons, the prisons that I want to investigate, which number one on my list is, of course, right here in Ohio for me.
Yeah.
You know it.
I think we've both wanted to get there for a very long time.
Yeah. Hopefully, I might still go. I think I'm going to go. I know you're not coming in, but in May, there's going to be a like a paranormal event. What do you call it? Like a convention type thing.
Mm-hmm. The Paracon,
yeah, at Mansfield Penitentiary. So it's like an easy way in, and I don't have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to investigate. So I think I'm going to go.
If you get anything, if you do go and you get anything there, we'll definitely have to do a show on it.
No, for sure.
Yeah, I think Waverly Hills is probably my top. Sandhaven, I would absolutely love to get to as well, just because it's here in North Dakota. The biggest problem with Sandhaven is it is in very disrepair. I'm sure pretty much all of these hospitals that we've mentioned are in disrepair, and probably some of them have probably been leveled. I'm not 100% on that though. But it is also owned by tribes out where it's at too. So it used to be, I think it was sold to the tribes a few years ago, but there had been so many people that had snuck onto that land. And now that it's tribal land, there's some pretty hefty fines if you're caught. Not that there wasn't beforehand, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the laws regarding a lot of these places nowadays, without having strict permission from those who basically own it in some fashion, the penalty is pretty high, which takes us back to the crazy amount of people in prison right now in America.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go, so I'm gonna.
Yeah. Well, and we even talked about this with Dara Marston's about, don't be stupid in going into places
I mean,
you don't have
there's
permission to be.
don't get me wrong. There are places that I've gone in guerrilla style, right? So
Right.
any of you,
I think we
know,
both
you
have.
guys know guerrilla filmmaking, basically. It's going in somewhere basically without permission. It's that simple. But yeah, like there are instances where going guerrilla is like, okay, cool. Like no one knows, no one getting hurt, none the wiser. Get in, get out. Enjoy it. But there are some places where you just don't do it because it's literally a felony and it will cost you a lot of trouble if you get caught. And trust that I'm one of those people at one point who thought, oh, I'll never get caught. And I never have gotten caught. But
Right.
you don't want to be that person who does, right? So it's better just to play it safe, respect the community, respect the spirits, respect yourself and your situation.
I will say that if you're going into a place that's open to the general public, what's the tower there in Ohio?
The tower.
Her castle.
Franklin?
Franklin's castle, yes.
Or are you Franklin or Squire? So Franklin.
Well, I'm sorry, Squire.
House.
Yeah, Squire's
Okay.
castle. Yes.
Squire.
Yeah. Because it's in a public park. If I'm not mistaken.
Squire's castle is in a public park, which I have a very short 1-minute documentary on that I did several years back. But yeah, you can go there. You can go inside of the castle. You can check it out, investigate it, all that. It's the only thing that's kind of sucks about it is it can be very popular during the nice seasons, especially during fall. And if you're doing investigations, it is not closed off, meaning you have walls all around you, you have doorways, but you have pretty much a full open ceiling. They took all the ceilings out so that no one can climb up there. So it's just open, to the skies above. So if it's raining or anything like that, or you got animals chirping and barking and doing whatever other noises animals do, that can interrupt your investigation a bit, especially EVPs.
On top of not going into places you don't have permission, also don't be going into places that are so dilapidated that you can be injured. I've heard of so many people getting hurt just because they wanted to get some evidence. So make sure you're being safe. What are some of your final thoughts on haunted hospitals specifically?
I don't know if I have any real nothing good.
Nothing good. I have all bad things to say.
No, that's not what I meant. I just meant there's nothing worthwhile to be like, oh yeah, this, and this. I think haunted hospitals are always going to be a very interesting place for investigators and adventurers in general. It's one of those places that are going in, the history. No matter what hospital it is, what happened there, at least to some extent. And there is a sense of adventure in that, knowing the things that happen and knowing where you stand nowadays, in the present time, but wow, back in history, back in the day, this happened. And for that reason alone, I think they're very popular. It's interesting. It's exciting. It's a part of history. When you think about the tuberculosis pandemic, that's something that's that's very fascinating. With me, like I would love to go to Europe. Just, I mean, for a number of different reasons. But one thing, I want to walk down the streets in which the Black Plague broke out. Like I know that's dark, but it's like I'm a fan of that kind of history, of understanding the reasons why that type of thing happened and how that could have been prevented. So, I think that's one of the things about hospitals that's always going to draw attention. And I think hospitals in particular are always going to draw attention for that reason. It's kind of like a piece of territory that is truly unclaimed. You walk in and it's a whole different world, especially these older places that are all dilapidated, that aren't being held up or kept up. So, like Justin said, I'll just reiterate, like, be careful if you go out there, whether, and I'm only saying this because I know some of you people aren't going to take my words about not going in guerrilla, but just be careful. Okay. So those of you who are going to do it, be very careful, because a lot of these places are not kept up to standards, based on the state, based on the city. So you can fall through like 5 floors and die.
That become a part of the haunting that is there. Yeah.
And if you do, let us know. We'll come investigate you. Maybe you get a spot on our show.
The one thing I'll say is, I mean, there's the reason these places are haunted. There was a lot of trauma, horrific deaths, stuff like that happened there. Like Eric mentioned earlier in the show, that if it's not human spirits out there, there's going to be something that could possibly be feeding off of that traumatic energy that you actually don't want to be taking a part of it. But be safe if you're going to do investigations. Please make sure you have permissions, and please don't go into modern hospitals just willy-nilly trying to do an investigation. I hate that it has to be said, but it has to be said because there's people there being treated. There's a lot of traumatic stuff going on there. I mean, if you're just doing a recording or something, okay, but don't just have a bunch of pieces of ghost hunting equipment out.
Can you imagine walking in with their whole crew just,
hey, dude, we're here to do an investigation. We heard this place is haunted. What's up?
I should have buy our cameras on your desk, please.
Or going into a patient's room. Hey, just ignore us like we're not even here.
What are the chances of you passing away today, sir? What?
The possibilities. But on top of that, we would love to hear your guys' stories. If you've been in a hospital and have had an experience, put it in the comments or reach out to us, whichever. You can reach out to us on our website. We have email, paratruthradio@gmail.com, or we're on all the socials. Reach out to us. We would love to hear stories. Just because we listed the top 5, but there's been so many experiences in modern day hospitals that I would love to hear people's stories about.
Yeah. So whether you're just the everyday investigator, or you actually work in a hospital system, you're an EMT, anything like that, definitely hit us with either an email or message us on Facebook. The other thing I do want to mention, because I know we kind of go over it really fast with the whole share, subscribe type thing, but we are trying to grow our personal YouTube. Thankfully, we are hitting thousands of you who are listening, and we are so thankful for all of you who tune in every Sunday, and even more for those of you who are listening to the archives. But we do have a personal YouTube channel, so if you're willing to subscribe to us on YouTube, just ParaTruth Reborn, we would love for you to do that. And I think once we hit probably around 200 subscribers, we're going to start posting special content that's only for subscribers that you guys can listen to or check out, both videos and audio. So that's something that we're really trying to work on here. It's not easy. I don't know if you guys know anything about YouTube also. We're open ears if you have any thoughts and ideas on what we can do to grow the channel.
Well, we're actually almost to 500 subscribers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Clearly, as you guys have noticed, I'm the creator. The creatives.
You don't pay attention.
I don't pay attention to the statistics. That's Justin's job.
Yeah.
Pretty,
So
because he knows things I don't.
we want to reach 500 subscribers. We do want to start releasing exclusive content, but we do need everybody engaged in order to do that. But this, as I mentioned earlier, has been a pre-recorded show for 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. I didn't bring it up, but we do have a guest next week. We're going to have a couple of guests and then back to us, and we're going to kind of be flip-flopping back and forth like that. Main reason being is we don't want to get burnt out like we did with the original iteration of the show. So definitely stay tuned to all the stuff that's going on. Check out the other shows that are on United Public Radio Network, because there's so many of them and so much great content there. Until next week, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.